Good morning, and welcome to another week of Journey with Christ. I'm your host, Mark Mitchell, a preaching minister here at the Park Avenue Church of Christ in Charleston, West Virginia. And I'm joined, as always, our resident expert and minister for over 50 years, Steve Fox. How's it going today, buddy?
I'm still an expert.
Yeah, you haven't lost it.
One more week I got.
Well, there may come a time where you may say something, I'll have to take it away, but hey, haven't done it yet.
Like when I'm in a nursing home gumming my oatmeal, you probably won't call me an expert on anything.
Well, you might be an expert on gumming your oatmeal, though. You never know.
And that Fox guy, he can gum that oatmeal better than anybody we've ever had.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody get out more places.
Well, we have to laugh about it because one of these days you only got one alternative. So you live as long as you can try to live and do the best you can, and it'll work out okay at the end if you're following who you're.
I don't know. I mean, there are a few people come up with dying in your sleep might be the most beneficial death, because most of them are either embarrassing or extremely painful or excruciatingly humiliating and painful. So it never was intended to be, as the old saying goes, you hear in the movies say he had a good death. Yeah, he died with his boots on, or facing the enemy, or whatever. Death's death.
Well, I think it's interesting to me that Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 says death is the last enemy. We got a lot of enemies that we deal with in this world, but death is the last one.
Yep. And at some point in time, Jesus will fix that one too. Mm-hmm. Of course, he's put a I don't want to say Band-Aid, but he's put a provision in for us so that we don't have to fear it to the degree that we still do.
And sometimes in our society, we get to the point where we don't even want to talk about it.
No. We
don't want our kids to know. I know people that don't take their kids to funerals or funeral homes. Well, they should understand at a very early age that if something is alive, eventually it will die.
Yeah, the other thing you hear people often use the expression, everybody's gone to heaven who's ever died, so, and you wonder, really?
Yeah.
But
okay, one little tidbit before we get to our text. Having this guy's funeral, and the preacher just went on and on and on about how great this guy was, and he gave to everybody. He was always so courteous to everybody. Give you the shirt off his back. Always helped in the neighborhood, helped in the community. Just was a good dad, and a good father, and good dad, and good husband. And finally, the widow sitting down in the front row looked at her son and said, "Jimmy, go up there and see if that's your dad."
Yeah, I've been to a few of those. I was like, he didn't know this guy, did he?
That's right. I've been to somewhere, I think, going, who's he talking about?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh. Well, what do you got in mind for us?
I'm glad we can laugh at death.
Yeah.
Because we can't do anything about it on our own.
I don't know if we can laugh at it, but we can definitely, as Paul put it, we can take some of the sting away. Mm-hmm. We can take some of the sting away. Because too many people in the last few years over many years, people have suffered from the consequences of death in family. And you can't make light of the separation that happens. It's painful.
Yes.
But we also know there's a second part. As Paul Harvey would say, there's a rest of the story coming. So.
Well, we're going to make a transition here just for a little bit. And we're going to talk about something that unless you're a newborn baby, everybody knows about this topic, and everybody at one time or another in their life have to choose where they want to be. Do you want to live in the darkness, or do you want to live in the light? And the prophets in the Old Testament, a lot of times, I didn't count them, but the prophets in the Old Testament a lot of times told Israel, you're walking in darkness and you need to walk in the light. You need to start walking the way God wants you to walk. So there's always been those two choices, even with Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Light and darkness. What do you want to do? You want to obey the command, or you want to tell God that you'd rather do it your way?
It's amazing how darkness was here before God brought in light.
Mm-hmm.
So you always have to keep that perspective in your mind. Darkness is prevalent by its very nature. It's only God who brings forth light. You know, He is the light by which everything is.
And once you have the light takes care, overcomes the darkness.
Yeah, it beats it back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's not like there's a spot right in the middle where there's a little shade of darkness. No, it beats light back. Light beats darkness into the corners and into the shadows.
I've had a lot, not a lot. I've had several good running buddies in my life, and I don't think the other guys will even see this program, so I don't have to worry about offending them. But I have a friend who's 76 years old, and I met him when I lived at Elkview back in the late 70s, early 80s, and I met him at a race, and Jimmy came up to me after the race and said, somebody told me you lived real close to me. And I said, well, where do you live? And I said, yeah, my house is close to your house. He said, well, maybe we could run together sometime. I said, okay. So he came over to my house a couple of times. His wife brought him over, and we ran, a couple of loops. And the third time he came over, I said to him, or the second time he came over, I said, well, why don't you come over to my house and we'll run from my house next time? He said, well, I'd have to have Betty bring me. I said, well, why do you have to have your wife bring you? And he said, because I'm blind.
Yeah,
And I said, I had run with him twice.
And didn't
know, didn't have a clue that the guy was blind. He has 5% vision.
Yeah.
And he lost it in middle school. It just started.
For him, everything is either light or dark.
Yeah.
There is no clarity.
He can see a shadow. If there's a snake down there and a stick, he can't tell the difference between the
Right.
two. But he amazes me at what the guy does,
Mm-hmm.
even though he has to live in the darkness. He trains horses. He does all kinds of things that you'd think blind
Well, you got to admire someone with that kind of issue.
What I could tell you 20 stories about Jimmy Fisher, but we were running in a race up at
It doesn't matter.
it was in the center of the state where they had the Walnut Festival. And
Wilkins?
Jimmy was running along beside me, and he said, and it had poured the rain before, and I said, okay, right, 2 steps to the right, because the dirt road was just, I'd say 3 steps left, okay, go left, now run about, okay, now go back to where you were. And Jimmy finally said, go on, you might win something in your age group, go on. And I said, nah, I'm staying with you. He said, no, go on. I said, no, I can. So finally I said, you sure? He said, yeah, I'll make it fine. So I just took off because I had a little bit left for the last couple miles. And there was this guy running along beside me. After he went with me, he went the same pace I was going. And after we got away from Jimmy, he looked around to made sure Jimmy couldn't hear. He said, that guy you're running with? I said, yeah. I said, he said, is he blind or retarded? And I said, uh-huh. I knew there was something wrong because I kept telling him how to stay out of the mud puddles.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to me what blind people can do. And I've often wondered how I would be able to adjust to that if I lost my sight. Well, what we're going to look at this morning in the 2 minutes we have left, we're going to look at what, well, I did this on purpose because I made an outline that's got a bunch of verses from Isaiah in it. Isaiah talking about light and dark. And I did it because I know that's your favorite Old Testament book.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So you get to read the first part. There's a passage in Isaiah 35, if our audience would like to read along. And there's one in 29, and there's one in 42. And the first thing we're going to do is look at those three passages, remembering that the same guy wrote
All three.
all three of them. Isaiah 35, 1 through 6.
The desert and the parched land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom like the crocus. It will burst into bloom. It will rejoice greatly and shout for joy. The glory of Lebanon will be given to it, the splendor of Carmel and Sharon. They will see the glory of the Lord, the splendor of our God. Strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear, your God will come. And he will come with vengeance, with divine retribution. He will come to save you. Then will the eyes of the blind be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer, and the mute tongue shout for joy. Water will gush forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert.
What is Isaiah, or what is God through the prophet Isaiah telling Israel what's going to happen?
In due time, things that will be made right, that are wrong. And there will be a moment, and of course we know the moment to be Jesus. It is the time when Jesus sets, as he said in his ministry, many times, gushing waters will flow. When he says, one of the other passages that Jesus has come to set things right, by the lame shall walk, the blind will see, the deaf will hear.
When we think of the word blind, I think most of us think, or at least we should, we think about what a wonderful transaction. There have been times, now I kind of knew I'd never be able to do this, but if I'd have died suddenly and somebody took my corneas, my eyesight, and gave them to Jimmy, can you imagine somebody being blind that long and all of a sudden you can see things around you? It's indescribable. And so here he says to Israel as a nation, the eyes of the blind are going to be opened. People who have never seen before are going to see.
Yep.
And the difference is going to be absolutely amazing. And then he says, the eyes of the blind shall be opened. Then shall the lame man leap like a hart, that's like a deer, and the tongue of the dumb sing for joy. There's going to be all kinds of changes. And like you said, in due time, this is going to happen to Israel if they follow him and if they live in the light. For waters shall break forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert. All Isaiah is saying is it's going to be different.
It's going to be made right. It's going to understand a lot of the Old Testament, you have to understand that Eden was the place God wanted them to have. But they ended up in the wilderness because of their sin. Mm-hmm. And God keeps telling them, if you can work on these things, you will find a degree of Eden. It won't be fully restored until Jesus comes. But there is a better way. And you keep chasing after things that cause you to be blind, cause you to be thirsty, cause you to be in danger. You can't hear, you can't speak. Your whole world is a mess.
There's one of those classic movies that your wife loves to sit down and watch every once in a while. There's a classic entitled East of Eden. Mm-hmm. And basically the author is saying that's where we all end up. We're supposed to be in Eden.
Right.
But by our choices we end up east of Eden. in a place where there's more darkness than there is light.
Yeah. There is well, at some point in time, I know we're going to get there, but there's an absence of God in east of Eden.
Exactly right. We're just going to look at one verse, 29:18.
In that day, the deaf will hear the words of the scroll, and out of gloom and darkness, the eyes of the blind will see.
Okay, now he throws in another group of people, the deaf. The deaf who've never heard anything will be able to hear the words of a book, and out of their gloom and darkness, the eyes of the blind shall see. The promise is, here is God's light, and if you walk in that light, and you understand what that is, and you make an attempt to obey that light, according to the verse that is down below where he's talking about the deaf people, out of the gloom and darkness, the eyes of the blind shall see. I don't remember the number. Jesus healed a few people who were blind, who have been blind their whole life. And for them to just, go from sitting up against the wall, getting people throwing pennies and nickels and dimes into a bucket somewhere. Jesus, on a couple occasions, says, well, what do you want? Well, what do I want? I know what I want. I've been blind all my life.
I want to see. I want to see.
That's probably right up at the top of the list when we consider what we're living with.
Absolutely. Imagine, there's a movie that Richard Dreyfuss is in where he is a music teacher, and I forget the name of the movie, but anyway, and he loves to play the piano. Music is what he truly, truly loves. And he has a son, and his son is deaf. And he struggles with that. But in due time, he comes up with ways between using vibration and light to illustrate his songs. And there's a moment in the movie where he puts on a concert for deaf children and does that. And he sees the expression on their face that they were just heard music without hearing music. You're right. When it comes down to all these aspects of life that you can miss, because as you shared in the beginning of this lesson, that blind people can navigate this world. Deaf people can navigate some aspects of this world. Lame people can navigate some of the aspects of this world. But is it the world they were intended to live? That's the problem. God says, I got something great.
I don't think I've ever seen the movie you had reference to, but I'm a big Richard Dreyfuss fan.
Oh, you'd love this one.
I've never seen him in anything that was bad.
Well, yeah, probably. Yeah. There's one or two, but hey.
And Kelly will tell me which ones not to watch. In that day, the deaf shall hear the words of a book, and out of their gloom and darkness, the eyes of the blind shall see. The gloom and the darkness doesn't sound. It's a description of something that you don't want to be in.
No, in fact, generally it is a opening line for a scary scene, in the gloom and darkness of the night.
Well, in our basement, where you come from the garage to the
there's a little gloom and darkness.
You open that door, and if we forgot to leave the lights on at the other end by the fireplace, you kind of walk through there, tapping, trying to make sure, okay, here's a chair, here's another chair, here's a couch, here's a fireplace. Don't fall into the fireplace. And if you finally get over to the other side where you can flip the switch.
Anybody ever scared you in that place?
I've been scared when there's nobody else in there except me.
I know, but deliberately bring you to your knees scared.
I don't think the kids were ever like that. No.
Okay. Yeah, right.
But it's just an awful feeling to not know where you are and what you're dealing with and what handicaps and what hurdles are in front of you.
I've shared this many times, but there was one time in my life where it was an October night, and there was no moon, no stars out that night because I think there was cloud cover. Like I said, it's an October night, and I was walking home up a country road where there was no houses and there was no light, and we couldn't see. I mean, and forgot the flashlight. We were literally sliding our feet to make sure that we stayed on the road because there was a creek and we could hear it as plain as day. I could hear everything
Oh,
that
I wish
night.
that was a part of the story. You didn't fall in the creek, did you?
No, I did not fall in the creek. But there was a couple times I was like, I'm gonna get down on my hands and knees and feel my way, because you can't feel with your feet, but you can feel with your hands.
Well, in our basement, when the previous owner built it, he put one of those little round receptacles.
Mm-hmm. Night lights.
It's a night light, and you can see that from here to the end of the.
In darkness, you can see as plain as day.
Yeah, but that's your aim. You're trying to get to that one place where you can
hope
reach
there's
up
nothing
and
in
turn
between.
it on. Yeah.
Between.
And you hope that the dog's not there. We have a lot of clothes baskets in that.
Yeah, there could be one there, and it was set down in the middle of the day that you don't think about till later on that night.
Well, my point is, if I didn't do a good job making it, my point is, you and I live in places like that where it's troublesome, and people who have no light whatsoever, who have no vision whatsoever. Isaiah and the other prophets use that as an example. You have light and you have darkness. You should make a great effort to stay in the light, because that's where it's going to be safest.
Well, do you want me to get to our last Isaiah verse?
Get the other Isaiah verse. Isaiah wrote this one too.
Isaiah 42. I'm going to begin with verse 5.
You start wherever you want.
This is what God the Lord says, the creator of the heavens, who stretches them out, who spreads out the earth with all that springs from it, who gives breath to its people and life to those who walk on it. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I will take hold of your hand. I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles, to open eyes that are blind, to free captives from prison, and to release from the dungeon those who sit in darkness. I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not yield my glory to another or my praise to idols. See the former things that have taken place, and new things I declare. Before they spring into being, I announce them to you. Man, that's a pretty big agenda.
There's a whole lot he's aiming at, isn't there?
Yes, there is. He lays as I like to say sometimes to the people, when you begin a story, you always generally lay the groundwork. Okay, what's there? Who are the players? Who are those? What is the environment like? God does that in the very beginning. He said, this is who I am. This is what I have done. But here's what I'm about to do to help those who won't listen to me. And he lays a tremendous amount of opportunities. I will take hold of your hand. I'm not waiting for you to come grab me. I'm going to take hold of your hand. Mm-hmm. And I will keep you, and I will make you to be a covenant for the people, of course, and a light for the Gentiles. Now, that's Jesus. And why is he doing this? To open the eyes of the blind, to free captives from prison, and to release from the dungeon those who sit in darkness. When you talked about in the very beginning the aspect of blindness, sometimes you don't even know you're in need of light to see. Mm-hmm. Because They've actually shown people who, at nighttime, your eyes will adjust to where it will get, you can acclimate over time the ability to operate in a darker world, you know. You can stumble around. I mean, like you said earlier, blind people figure out how to maneuver through.
It can adjust. I like, look, there are a couple of verses in here about vision, but I like this illustration that he uses. I have taken you, this is God speaking, I have taken you by the hand and kept you. Some of my greatest memories of the 3 kids that I have are when you'd just be walking along and one of them would reach up and take your hand for no particular reason, just to say, I'm here beside you, Dad. And God says, I have taken you by the hand and I've kept you. Like a little child, I've taken you by the hand and guided you into this light. Now you're going to decide what you do with that light and darkness.
Well, and many times the taking of the hand is in fearful moments too. Mm-hmm. And it's not only as a security or as a let's walk together hand in hand. Sometimes the hand is grabbed because there's a fearful situation. There's trust understood in the taking of a hand.
They may be walking into the darkness.
That's right.
I mean, if I'm going into a cave, I want to hold Susie's hand. I don't want to go in there by myself.
Well, anytime you're in a situation where there is the potential of the unknown, you don't want to go in alone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and again, I say this, taking a hand is our physical actions that demonstrates a trust that we feel down inside, and we just can't help ourselves. We grab hold of those that we want near us.
And in this case, Isaiah is asking, well, the verb would be stronger than asking. He is asking through the power of God for an entire nation to do this.
Yeah.
He said, I don't want one guy doing, oh, look, there's some light. I think I'll live in that light. He wants an entire nation to get out of the darkness as fast as they can and put your ideals and your philosophies and everything else that you live by in the light. And if you put them in the light and obey that light, you won't have to worry about the darkness.
That's right. One other thing I would like to mention out of Isaiah 42 is this statement, I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not yield my glory to another or my praise to idols. See, the former things have taken place, and new things I declare. Before they spring into being, I announce them to you. I'm always one of the great things that the book of Isaiah declares. There's people who often joke that what is the first gospel? And some say, well, Paul would have said Isaiah was the first gospel. Because right here, Isaiah announces, I'm telling you these things before they happen, so that you will be able to recognize them when they do. Because you're blind. In Isaiah, how many times does the word blind, deaf, and hard-hearted?
Yeah.
Those 3 elements are described constantly because and God is telling Isaiah, I'm announcing right now, this is what's going to happen. Are you going to be paying attention?
Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I will try to defend it if you say I'm dead wrong. I think you could honestly say that Jesus' favorite scripture reading is from this passage in Isaiah, because according to verse 16, he comes to Nazareth and he goes into the synagogue, which was his custom, and he stood up to read.
Yeah, and he turned.
Now, he's going to decide what, it's not somebody over here in the corner telling him what to read. He takes the book, and he stood up to read, and there was given to him the book of the prophet Isaiah. he wants to read something from Isaiah. And he opened the book and found the place where it's written. Can you imagine Jesus of Nazareth in the synagogue here? And I love this. It says he found the place where it was written. Jesus was having to go through some kind of papyrus or a scroll or something to find it.
Yeah, rolling it up, finding the one spot.
Jesus said, I'm sorry, I can't find this prophecy yet. Give me a minute here. So the prophecy that he found, which I would say was his favorite, where it was written, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me. And the Messiah says, I'm supposed to preach the good news to the poor. I'm supposed to proclaim release to the captives. I'm supposed to proclaim recovering of the sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. And I love it. He closed the book and handed it back to the attendant and sat down. And Luke writes, and all the eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. Oh, man alive.
Well, it's not only he's doing this in Nazareth, hometown.
Where almost everybody knows him.
Jesus has just come back from being 40 days in the wilderness. You know, he's been to a wedding feast, and this is Sabbath day that he's in the synagogue. And it's his turn to read, and they know, he's participated. And then he does that. What a moment. And I love Luke's description. It's like he went up, like a good reporter, he went and asked a few people, tell me what happened on this day. And the eyes of everyone were fastened on him. Today the scripture is fulfilled.
They all knew that what he read was a messianic scripture. And so now they're looking at each other and go, what's he saying?
Is he saying he's the Messiah?
He's saying he's the one? Nah, that can't be right.
That can't be right.
We know his family.
Yeah.
He came from Bethlehem.
Yeah, I mean, that's Mary's son. Who knows who the father is? You know how communities are. There'd have been,
I love this.
Over the fence, there'd have been a little gossiping going on.
Sat down, and the eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you get done with a sermon, you sit down in front row, and all the rest of us just keep staring because we are so amazed at how long that sermon went. No, I'm sorry. I'm transferred. I was talking about me, but I didn't talk about you. They're all sitting there just staring at him like, that can't be what he's saying.
No,
it must be.
That's Mary's son.
He must be saying something else.
Yeah, that's a carpenter's son.
Let's look at one more verse. Chapter 7, verse 22. I'll let you read it.
Okay. Luke 7, verse 22.
Yes.
So he replied to the messengers, go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleaned, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me.
Every once in a while when Christians get a little backed up in their thinking and maybe backed up in their rationale about who they want to follow and who they want to be like and whether or not they want to walk in the darkness or in the light, they should go back and read this. This is a story about John the Baptist who is in prison, and I'm just guessing it's kind of dark in that prison.
Well, for someone who most of his life was never afraid of anything because he lived out in the wilderness, all of a sudden, in a dungeon, in a dark hole, about to lose your life, about to be, he doesn't know it, but he's going to be beheaded. Mm-hmm. Doubt creeps in the darkness. And here he is. and he's sending messenger to Jesus. Are you sure you're the one? I'm scared. I want to make sure. I want to know that I did what I was supposed to do, and I didn't saddle up to the wrong horse, you know. You got to appreciate, even to the extent that even Jesus calls John one of the greatest ever born. But the greatest ever born doubted too. Yeah. Struggled in that darkness. And that, to get back to what you started off in the very beginning with us, the darkness is scary. That's why God keeps telling us, come to me. Find the light.
I think we can all envision John the Baptist in a cave, in prison somewhere. There's not a lot of floodlights and Christmas tree lights, and there's not a lot of lights in there. It's pretty dark.
Whatever light he had, it was just inconsequential.
So he's going, okay, I did what I wanted to do. I did what God wanted me to do. I did it as well as I could. And I still end up in here. I wonder if he's the right one. And yeah. I like what you said about, is this a horse I throw my saddle on?
Yeah.
Because maybe John's Baptist is thinking, maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe I messed up.
Maybe I'm in the darkness, but I missed the light. So, and Jesus doesn't reprimand him and say, "What's the matter with you? All the signs I gave you, all the wonders I gave you, all the preaching opportunities I gave you. What's wrong with you?" He doesn't do that at all. He says, "You go back here and tell those people what you saw."
Well, he uses the verse that he knows John will understand. This is a messianic statement, as you stated earlier. The blind see, the lame walk, the prisoners are released, the dead are raised. Everything that you know about the Messiah is being done. Mm-hmm. Trust in that. Trust in that. Grasping in that moment is what all of us will end up, because there are moments where we're going to be in the dark, because like John, he has to be thinking, maybe this is his Job moment. Mm-hmm. Am I going to lose my faith in this tragedy? Because that's what darkness brings about into us. The fear of the unknown.
You tell John, go and tell John what you've seen and what you've heard. The blind, this is the first category, the blind receive their sight. It's always in there, almost as if this is the most important thing that Jesus did for anybody from a physical standpoint, when he allowed people to regain their vision.
Well, John thought it was important enough that he spent an entire chapter, first chapter of his gospel, John 1, making sure, light and dark, blind will see. It is without a doubt the most obvious explanation of the difference between God and everything else.
Well, here's a great blessing. You've been talking about the Beatitudes on Sunday morning, but here's a great, great promise to all of us. And blessed is he who takes no offense at me.
That's right.
There are going to be people who say, I am who I am. There are going to be people who say, this guy's a phony. And if you're one of those who are walking in the light and trying to follow him, then that promise is given to you that you are blessed if you're not offended by him. We have some other verses. I think we probably ought to hold on to those until next week and give us a chance to come up with some things that are absolutely brilliant compared to those two passages.
Well, in all fairness, you can't go wrong with Isaiah and Luke as they connect the dots between the two stories. The prophecy and the moment. And and there is no greater illustration in the Bible than light and darkness And it plays throughout the entire book.
And we all deal with it on an everyday basis.
That's right.
Me trying to get through my basement. You
Well-
trying to get your boat out of the river when it's pitch dark.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those moments. But you know, one of the things that we all understand when someone says to us, "Get out of the dark, buddy." You know, you're
Blind as a bat.
blind as a bat. You cannot see your hand in front of your head, your eyes. No, when we know what it means open your eyes to see what's really there. And if there's anything in our world right now that needs to be talked about, it is the blindness of our present world. Because they have done everything they could to cover the light of God. Everything they can.
To quote Andy Stanley in that book that I just finished, what would a wise man do?
What would a wise
Would
man
a
do?
wise man walk in darkness? Or would he, obviously if he had the chance, to walk in light?
He'd go get some light.
He'd get some light.
He'd get some light.
He'd yell, "Susie, give me the flashlight so I don't fall over these two chairs for the 5th time today."
Well, we're so glad you tuned in this week, and we will continue there next week as we continue our study on blindness. And I understand we make a little transition here in a little bit. So, on behalf of Steve and I, we wish you a great week and look forward to seeing you again next week. God bless.